Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Nikateko Kuliwe. I'm commonly known as Nika, and I'll be your host this evening. First and foremost, I would like to thank UX Joburg's sponsor, Sand Dollar Design. Sand Dollar Design is a design lead consulting firm, and if you'd like to find out more about their services, please check out their websites on sanddollardesign.co. This evening, we will be focusing on three broad sections, namely the theoretical, practical, and networking sections. For the theoretical component, our speaker for this evening will be talking about content mapping. We will then move on to the practical side of things and apply what we have learned. The guest speaker will walk us through the entire process. A request has been made from the guest speaker that you please make copies of the Google documents or rather download them instead of removing them directly from the drive. Removing them directly from the drive will result in people not being able to access the documents, which is something we all do not want. So just before the practical section commences, a link to the Google Drive will be shared on the chat, so please be on the lookout for that. And lastly, we will have a networking section where you will be allocated to breakout rooms in teams to connect with members of the UX community. This is a very interactive talk. Therefore, if you want to engage with the speaker, please leave your questions in the chat. We strongly encourage this to avoid having multiple people speak at the same time and also to avoid confusion on which attendee should speak first. Seeing that we do have a limited time, we can only go through so much questions. Therefore, only a few questions will be picked at random so that the guest speaker can answer them effectively and efficiently. With that being said, all of our UX meetup sessions are being recorded. If you'd like to go back and recap on what will be discussed today, or if you know of anyone who would have loved to join us today but wasn't able to, they can find all our recordings on two main platforms. Our first platform being our YouTube channel called UX Joburg. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so that you can receive notifications every time we upload a new video. You can also find videos of our past events on the channel as well. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please make sure that your microphone is on mute? Thank you. Then we have our UX Joburg podcast. This is our second platform, which focuses purely on the speaker's talk and nothing else. Awesome. So without further ado, we are now moving on to the main event for today's meetup, and I would like to introduce tonight's guest speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you our phenomenal guest speaker, Nicole Pillay. Nicole is a senior UX writer, a content strategist, and a user experience advocate. She holds an undergrad in psychology and a diploma in digital marketing. She has been in digital for 10 years now and in IT, design, and software creation for 6 years. She specializes in UX writing, design thinking, microcopy, and content-first design. Being on teams that create design systems and libraries has occupied most of her time recently. She has worked for large corporations and startups on a contract basis as well as a permanent member of staff and is currently a global mentor, for the UX Writing Academy. Ladies and gentlemen, I hand over to the amazing Nicole Pillay. Nicole.
I'm here.
Awesome. Okay, I've stopped presenting, so you should be able to share your screen. You're on mute, Nicole.
Thanks, Mika.
It's a pleasure.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited you could join me for this workshop. And I am even more excited that UX writing is being given the light that it deserves, I guess, as part of the software lifecycle and just general UX design process. So today, I am going to take you guys through content mapping, user journey mapping, and a whole bunch of really cool stuff about content types. And I'm hoping that you guys find this useful. There is a link in the chat to the documents that we'll be using during this workshop. So let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Nicole Pillay, as I'm sure you guys know already. I am 33 years old and I am multiracial. I come from a long line and history of very, very strong women. So on the screen right now is my mom on the right and my grandmother and my younger brother on the left. And they were the ultimate storytellers. I cannot even express how they told stories with the most amount of exaggeration and embellishment, but they considered their empathy a weakness. And as you guys can tell, I have found ways to monetize mine. So empathy is actually at the core of what we're doing here tonight. And it's at the core of UX writing, the core of UX design, and just human-centered design and creating things for people. I like to make the comparison between designing software and it being such an iterative process to the likeness of life, really, and how we continue to iterate. And the role of a UX writer is actually to consume complex flows and language and simplify it by providing a user with what they need at the time that they need it. And I feel like design being an iterative process and liking it to life is really a good analogy because we design and we create and we build on that over and over again to make the product better as we grow and as we learn. So I'm assuming that most of you have an understanding of UX design and are part of the software creation process somehow. So if you haven't already, please download the docs in the link. It's a link to my Google Drive, and there are a number of documents there. And then the link is actually in the chat. You could also use a pen and a paper to do this workshop. You don't necessarily need to download those documents. And most of what I'll be presenting will be on the screen, and what you'll need to do during the workshop will be on the screen. I've done quite a lot of the groundwork, and this is going to be a short workshop. I don't really want to take up a lot of your time because the processes that we're completing actually do take quite a bit of time. So I've shortened it by completing some of them and taking you guys through the steps. This workshop is based on design thinking, or the principles of design thinking, which is basically solving problems by putting people or users at the center of the work that we do. So solving for the human need, which is human-centered design. So we're all going to be solving the same problem tonight with the same problem statement and persona. I've created a very high level persona for the purpose of this workshop. And I'm going to give a brief explanation of an empathy map, which is one of the main resources we'll be using tonight. Actually, we'll be using maps in general. So we're doing the user journey map and the problem statement we all have. I will be going through content types related to the problem statement and the journey, and then we will go into empathy mapping. So the scenario that I've created is something I feel, or something we probably all are experiencing or have experienced in the past six months, and it's related to the COVID vaccine journey. And we're building a platform that tracks the COVID-19 vaccine journey in conjunction with the Department of Health. We've done research and found that users need a digital home for their vaccine information. They also need access to information about the vaccine post and pre-vaccine. That's all the info we have at this stage. We need to do some research, obviously, and interview some users and start plotting the user journey and what will be needed at the different stages of the journey. Tiffany's our persona for this evening. Obviously, I've skipped some steps on persona creation and UX research, which are all prerequisites to create the journey map and plot content using the empathy maps. I've plotted a very high level journey for the purpose of planning and mapping the content. And as you can see at the top is the journey: register, first vaccine, post first vaccine. The typical questions, emotions, what we need is on the left. And I usually use this map to help understand the emotional state of the user at each stage of the journey so that we can provide the content that's needed. If you're a UX designer, what I'm saying and doing here is literally the basics, and actually the rest of the process will prove the importance of understanding UX design principles as a UX writer. I've plotted some questions that we can anticipate Tiffany may have at the different stages of this journey. And I'd like us to take some time to read through the questions, and then you can suggest the emotional or the emotions that she will be feeling or experiencing at each stage. So you can post your responses in the chat if you like, or you can plot them out on your own if you've drawn out this journey map or if you've downloaded the doc. And I'm going to give everyone 2 minutes to read through the questions and then jot down some of their emotions. So I need to start a timer. And your 2 minutes starts now.
So if you guys didn't really hear the question, if you can plot the emotions for each stage of the user journey that's on the map or on the user journey right now. So if you can add that to the chat, that would be great. So whatever emotions you feel Tiffany might be feeling at the different stages of the journey, and we'll see how we plot it going forward. So there's 30 seconds, but I think I'm going to extend it to another minute because I haven't received any responses in the chat of what emotions you think Tiffany might be experiencing during each part of this journey. Yes, she feels confused, correct. Definitely uncertain, yes. Okay, 1 more minute. Yes, very anxious, correct. Worried, that's right. Frustrated, yes. hesitant. That's a good one. I love the need more info. That's very important. Unsure. Yeah. Those are all great answers, guys. Intimidated, overwhelmed, yes. All your responses are great. So I'm going to move on to the next slide since you guys gave me such good responses. And as you can see, a lot of the stuff you guys said is here.
A lot of people consider understanding user emotions as like the fluff work. And I actually read a really good book by Don Norman about emotional design. And he actually breaks down people's emotional responses into 3 different stages, and how that the success of your product or your app or your website or whatever is actually just like based on the emotional response and how you've designed it, you know? So understanding our users' emotions will help us actually write the content that counteracts those emotions. So if we map this out and we can anticipate what her next emotion will be, we can mitigate that by writing content or providing a design that will actually help her before she feels that way. If Tiffany is feeling anxious or nervous, we need to give her as much information as possible. We also need to explain to her what is possible on the actual platform. And if she's like, when she goes for her first vaccination, she'll be stressed, as we can see. So we need to provide clarity and care, and connecting with the CDC or WHO for vaccine info is really necessary to, provide her with as much vetted information as possible to assist her with her emotional state. So I've written down what we need to do, as you guys can see at each stage. And I'm going to highlight what the problem statement is, and then we're going to go into content types. So yeah, let's move on, and then we can discuss content types. This problem statement is focusing on her first vaccination, and it explains that she needs to make an informed decision about being vaccinated or getting vaccinated, and she registers for the vaccination in preparation for her first dose. Because we have insights on the journey and her emotional state, and the problem statement now seems quite this problem statement now seems quite easy to fix, So what we're going to do next is continue with the user journey map. However, this is the next part of this is the user journey map that I use to map out content types. It isn't the traditional user journey map that most designers use, because it kind of ends at what we need to do and doesn't contain content types. So a UX writer would elaborate on the actual user journey map and create the content types column, which is what I've done in the next slide, and you'll see. And I'm going to need some interaction on that particular one, because I think it's necessary for us all to understand how to map out content types based on the journey we've just completed. These are micro content types. And I've added these micro content types based on the flow that we're in. So this is registration. However, content types as a whole are essentially the building blocks of a brand and like content management system, digital ecosystems, you know. So I found that too often deciding what content types will be created and the properties of those types are usually decided by a developer with very little context about the content that they will contain, which makes it really hard as a writer to create content with content types that have been developed or created by someone who doesn't have the full context of the flow. So based on all this information we already have and understanding the problem statement, I'd like us to now plan the content types. So it's quite high level what I've done here. And this will later inform and assist the designer with wireframing. So I haven't added this column in the document on the drive because I've kept the user journey map in its original state. And you can actually add this column in if you'd like, you know, to use it as I do. I've actually never seen haven't seen other UX writers doing this from a user journey mapping level. So for registration specifically, we need a strong header, also letting the user know that this platform is connected to the Department of Health. Then I've got some body copy that should advise what documents are required, and some bullet points about what can be done on this platform. I've also put a cell phone number input field there for the reminders that we're going to be sending the user, so cross-platform. So what I'd like us to do now, I'm going to set another timer for 2 to 3 minutes, and I'd like you guys to please map out content types that you think will be necessary for the first vaccine flow or journey that the user is in, and what you think would be necessary to assist the user based on what we've mapped. I'm going to start the timer. You can also put it in the chat if you'd like, or you can map it on your own. 2 minutes, or let's see, maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Please, everyone, keep their microphone muted. Thank you. I love the form for personal details. I think that's a great idea. Some great questions, more information regarding what the VAX is about. That's awesome. Definitely. Calendar, yes, guys. Infographic, yes, definitely. A progress bar, that's awesome. I love the progress bar idea. FAQs, yes. Pre-existing conditions list, that's so awesome. Yes, definitely. That's definitely something. Definitely a checklist of things you'll need. So specifically content types that I've picked up from what you guys have written is FAQs, infographics, a stepper, which is great because you need to know where you are in the process. That's awesome. Exclusion cases. Wow. A live chat. That's really awesome. Yes. That would be very beneficial, especially after you've been vaccinated and you have questions and you're not sure if your symptoms are okay or if they're strange. A chatbot. I love the chatbot. Oh, wow. A count of number of people vaccinated in your area. Awesome. That's a great suggestion, Candice. Location maps, that's awesome. I think we might have gone over 3 minutes because I kind of forgot to set the timer. But I think all your suggestions are so great. As you guys will see in the next slide, I'm validating everything that everyone has said. And some of the suggestions I didn't even think of. So that just speaks to the value of designing in a team and with other people. A support group, that's so great.
Here we have some content types based on the first vaccination journey. I've suggested an infographic connected to the CDC and WHO, or we could use the info from their sites to create our own infographic. We could put together some FAQs. We could also connect to a live chat to a doctor to ask about the symptoms she may be experiencing. We could do some cross-platform comms, which is what I mentioned earlier on, between SMS and the site. So obviously she's going to have a lot of questions, as we've written down earlier on. So being able to answer those questions, or being able to have access to a live chat, or being able to have access to a platform to communicate and get feedback from is necessary at this point in time to get advice. I could speak about content types all day, but I think like the importance of having the right content type and the right actual content at the right time is very necessary in the success of a particular flow. And I mean, I don't really think I have to get into the details of how early you should have real copy integrated into your UI to this group of people, because I think you guys understand the importance of that. And yeah. And completing this process in the beginning of your design process, or doing this at the beginning of any new feature that you're working on, or whatever it is, or new flow that you're working on, honestly saves you so much time down the line in the process of creating your designs. And knowing what content types you'll need will help you to actually integrate real copy into your UI at a later stage. Yay, we're on empathy maps finally. But I could literally speak about content types, text hierarchy, scannability forever and ever and ever. So empathy maps and not empathy map. The reason why it is plural and not singular is because I'm presenting two empathy maps. One is an in-journey map, and the other is a persona-related empathy map. And I'm going to explain what the purpose of each map is, and how, when, and why they should be used and can be used. This is quite different for a UX writer, I would say, and presenting two empathy maps. I use them, you'll understand how I use them. Sometimes use both of them, sometimes I use one. It just depends, and you can do the same. So I'm presenting two empathy maps because one is the traditional version of the map, and the other isn't. And finally, one of the two empathy maps that I'm presenting, some people consider an empathy map to be the first step in design thinking. So empathy maps are basically used to create a shared understanding of the user's need, and to help make decisions based on information we already have. But it also, in this instance, is specifically related to the journey we just mapped out and how Tiffany is experiencing that journey. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about this map because it's widely used for this purpose. You could actually also use an empathy map for this one, for brand tone and voice, if you like, to actually just map out the brand's tone and voice so you communicate in that way. It's been used that way before too. This is my favorite empathy map because it's about the user. It's traditional in its structure and purpose of an empathy map, but non-traditional in the questions that we're asking. An empathy map cannot exist without a persona. And empathy map versus journey mapping and personas are all integrated, and one cannot exist without the other. And now that we have the content types, we've created an understanding of the journey. We understand the emotions of the user. We have an in-depth understanding of who we're communicating with, and that's very important. We also understand the problem we're solving, and it's easier to write the content that's needed because we have all this information. So I'm not going to read all the questions, but if you have a journey map, but no persona, this will be difficult to complete without your persona. However, you could attempt to answer these questions and create a persona from this map. So I consider it to be kind of multifaceted in that sense, that it can be used early on in the process, but also can be used at this point, which is technically earlier on in the design thinking process, but kind of late in the general process. But anyways, so the relationship between personas, empathy maps, and journey maps is that they are not replacements for each other. They serve no purpose without the persona being in place, as I mentioned. We can base the understanding of the persona on user interviews that we've done. Or if we don't have that level of data, it's going to be kind of hard to answer these questions without knowing or having this type of persona in existence already and having access to this type of persona to create or to collect the data that we need. The significance of this mapping system is that it allows you to gather as much information about the user and also use that information to advise what content types you will be using and what could go into the design. But it also allows you to see conflicting information you may not otherwise acknowledge if you were not looking at it closely. The journey map that I created was a very, very high level basic journey map, except for the content types column that I added in there. But it's quite high level. It doesn't have very, very much detail, but it can advise the journey and issues you may face in the journey. A lot of people do the empathy map first and then the persona and then the empathy map, and then they go into user journey mapping, because the empathy map helps you to identify what the user is struggling with, and the journey map allows you to identify where in the process this is occurring. Because of this, it makes little to no sense to create these two independently of each other. They should be done together at the same time. And I think this process is very necessary for design, but also for content. And it is hard as a writer to write content without all this information. And I've had to do that quite a lot. So before we get into questions, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on something I'm very passionate about. And I'm grateful for all the engagement and for having a platform where a UX writer can speak about a very detailed part of the design thinking process or the software creation life cycle, and having people listen to it. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to do that and for doing something that I absolutely love every single day.
To everyone who just joined, I'm so sorry. This was a short workshop, but I think it will be online on Sandollar Designs YouTube page. So I don't know if anyone has any questions they'd like to post in the chat, or they'd like to ask directly. That would, okay, here we go. Around mapping, have you ever written without them? And what was the benefit? Yes, that happens all the time. Designers bring you screens and they're just like, can you please write some copy here or there? I just need a few words. So it does happen. The process I presented is when you have a lot of time, actually, well, it should be done. It's the thorough version of the first part of design thinking. So it should be done, but we don't always have the time to do it. So, which really sucks as designers. But yeah, definitely you can write the copy without the mapping, but you wouldn't know who you'd be writing for, and you wouldn't know the journey you're writing on. And there's a lot that would be missing from that. What are the cons when you write without their mapping? Well, context. So you don't have any context. You're speaking without information about your user. You're writing without information about your user. You don't have a lot of information, and that really sucks. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen quickly so you guys can actually see me and I can answer questions properly. What is happening? Okay. I'm going to answer some of the rest of the questions. Is there an impact? Okay, wait. What are the cons where you write without mapping? I already went through that. Is there an impact associated, positive or negative? Definitely negative, because you don't know who you're writing for. So you write copy that could be for the wrong user, explaining the wrong flow, giving the user information that they don't need at the wrong time. So this process assists people, or us as designers, in actually understanding what information is given at the right time and what information we should be providing our users with at the right time. So if we don't provide them with the right information at the right time, we run the risk of so many things, just like overall a bad experience, and your user could drop off, you could lose customers, you could lose money. It's just not great overall. Is there a way to practice how to do content mapping? Yes, there is. I would say in the beginning, if you don't have a user flow, I would suggest you need one of those, because that's a prerequisite for mapping the content. But start off with writing, as you guys did in the chat, all the different pieces of content that would be required at the different stages of the journey. So it would help to map that way by knowing where the user is in the journey, and then thinking what information they would need to provide, or what information we would need to provide them at that point. So you can, if you do that over and over again for different journeys, you become really good at mapping the content. I guess without an empathy map, you don't. Oh, I missed that question. Wait, what did it say? Okay, I guess without an empathy map, you don't know what problem you're solving. Exactly, Kaya. Exactly. From a person who studied marketing, how would one not confuse this type of persona to a marketing persona? They can actually be the same. So it doesn't necessarily have to be different, but a persona, when you're doing a persona for the journey map specifically, there's a lot more detail, I think, that goes into it for the actual experience versus who you're marketing to. Okay, so you guys can see me. How do you create acceptable personas? Would you have a profile specific market? Wow. An acceptable persona. You're gonna have to give me more info on that. I don't actually know what you mean by an acceptable persona.
So just to elaborate on that question, I wanted to know, Nicole, how did you create Tiffany?
Okay, so I gathered, so vaccination process in general, and when the Department of Health opened vaccination for, I think it was under 33s, or I think that's what it was. I used a lot of information about the vaccination process and people who had been vaccinated and who were going to get vaccinated. And we live in South Africa. We know what our landscape is. We know the people that we live with, and we know exactly who we're marketing to if we're in this context in this country. So I created her persona from everyday person in South Africa that was getting vaccinated in that specific age group. Hope that answers your question, Mika. Thank you for this. It's been really great. Thank you so much. It's been great and informative. Thank you for joining. What's the best way to empathize with the user without having enough qualitative and quantitative research? Oh my gosh, that's a great question. That is such a good question. It's so hard. It is very, very hard to empathize with the user without having data. Look, I think empathy, there are some people that score higher on empathy or their lack of empathy than others. So as a designer and as a writer, we have really high empathy scores. So, like, as you work in the design field and the more time you spend working in design, and you put your user at the center of everything you do, it's, that helps with empathizing with your user. But you have to collect data. Data is so important for the experience, for writing, for designing, for the entire process. Data is very, very important. So it's going to be a little hard to empathize with your user without having enough data about that user. You can always try and put yourself in their position, but it's never going to be the same if if you had collected all the information. What's the role of the content strategist during different stages of the project, like discovery, research, ideation, wireframing? Okay, I can present to you my ideal process, but that's never how things go. So I would say if you get your UX writer or your content strategist involved from inception, from the beginning of the process, it's going to help your project exponentially. And in general, when you have another eye from a writer's perspective, when you have a writer's eye on the designs that you're doing, or a writer's eye on the wireframing and the process you're going into, you'll always have additional context on how to communicate with the user. And I'm a big advocate for content first design, and it's really important for us to place the content in the beginning of the process so that we can map out the conversation first, and then wireframe from that conversation. I hope that answers your question. Strategies during different stages. I mean, yeah. Discovery, obviously, they need to be there. Research, UX writers do their own research. The good ones, they do their own research. They research plain language. They research natural language. They read through weird documents to get natural language. They look at Twitter. UX, they do A/B testing. They do all sorts of things. Good UX writers will do their own research at different stages of the UX writing process. So, yeah. What's the role of content? Okay, I've answered that. How do you gain buy-in for introducing the content mapping process with stakeholders who do not see the value of it quite yet? Um, I've been fortunate enough to work in some great environments, or at least work with some great people in some awesome teams that do see the value of collecting data, and that do see the value of a UX writer and UX researcher or a product designer. So I've worked in teams with people who value design, and it's very hard to work in a team that does not value design, and it's very hard to work with people who don't believe that the particular processes or part of the design processes are valuable. And it's quite a holistic thing. You have to work on each part of the design process and each part of the content process in order to get a good product out there. So personally, I would, if you cannot back up any of what you're saying with data to say, if I change this, this is what it's going to be, and if I make it better, we're going to retain our users. If you can't do that, if you can't show them value, I'm not really sure why they hired you in a design role to begin with, because designers are meant to do that. They're meant to question and make products better. So it's going to be very difficult for you to gain buy-in from stakeholders if they don't believe in the design process as a whole. And you need good design leadership for that, to be honest. You need really good design leadership to advocate for design outside of you being one lone designer. Love the experience. Okay. Do you have a list of content types that you could share as a resource? I do have a list of content types that I will add to the Google Docs. And that's basically just components, to be honest. Content types and components are very similar, in my opinion, when you're designing and writing content in this way, or at least mapping in this way. Content types and components used for content are very important. I think I did mention that slightly, or like touch on that a little in my talk. Great presentation. How would you typically connect or carry out your empathy map findings to storyboarding? Okay, cool. So it's part of the UX process. So if you are already doing user journey mapping, it should be part of the storyboarding process. It should form part of your design process and shouldn't stand alone at all. A UX writer and a UX designer, or content strategist and a UX designer, have to work hand in hand for this to become like a holistic process that everybody uses. And you have to work in conjunction with each other to make the process better. A designer doing this on their own, or a writer doing this on their own, is slightly difficult, because someone needs to wireframe, someone's going to need to write. And in most instances, I know you guys don't have UX writers with you, and you're writing, as a designer, you're writing yourself, which can be quite difficult. There's so many tools I would suggest, and I don't know if you guys watched my talk on the art of UX writing, and it's just basics about how to be a better designer, or how to be a designer and a UX writer and wear both hats at the same time. So I will share the link somehow to that. Okay, I think I might have done all the questions. Can I have you ask for the link to the YouTube channel and I can go? Okay, cool. I think Mika's going to post the link when this presentation is, when this meetup is done. I think Sandala Design will probably post the link to this talk on YouTube, and then you guys will be able to see that. How do I master language and tone of voice content types if I'm a GUC writer? Wow. I don't know how you're going to master language and tone of voice of content types if you're a GUC writer. I don't think anyone is a trash writer. I think you just need to spend time on your skills and actually just work on them. Are you available to consult on projects or review help with organization content strategy? Yes, I am. You can just hit me up on LinkedIn. Yeah. Have you ever, okay, here we go. Have you ever faced a challenge where it's modern agile processes and design principles versus legacy? Yes. in any recent projects? Yes, everywhere, all the time. Because of where South Africa is, the landscape of technology, things were created a long time ago and people didn't iterate on them, or back-end systems were built with old technology naturally, and now things are evolving. So legacy systems are trying to meet the agile principles and design principles and agile processes, and there's a lot going on from a development perspective. So yes, I have worked on a lot of legacy systems, and I have worked on a lot of teams that are trying to bring legacy systems to 2021, and that's difficult. But yes, I have worked on those, and it's a long process. Lebu, you've had your hand up for a long time. I'm really sorry, I just saw it now. Would you like to ask your question still if you're here?
Yes, please. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Okay, so I have a question around existing products. What process would you implement? What UX process would you implement around an existing product? Or would you just implement a UI?
For an existing product, you need to do an audit, I would say, a general audit of everything, because you can't do, or you could do a UI refresh on your existing product, but your flows might not be up to par, or your flows might not be, the best flows you could have. So I don't know what the situation is exactly, but I would say you should do an audit, and you should do like a full refresh on your UX design. And on your UX design and on your UI. I think like doing just a UI refresh will just make it look pretty, but you might still have the same issues you had before with the design and with the processes.
So it's like a white label product.
Okay.
The UX has already been done, and the clients actually purchase it, and then we just, I don't know, now we're trying to fit in where UX process can just come in here, or we just start off with the UI. So I think we're just trying to find our feet around that.
So I think I have a lot of questions about like how this was purchased and who it was purchased from and what you guys are currently doing with it and what you've done already. So maybe we can have like a breakaway chat at some point, so you and I can talk separately, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Nicole, just to actually touch on that, our breakup rooms will start at 6 o'clock. So you guys have 5 minutes there for questions.
Okay. People are asking, please share the link to the workshop on UX writing. Great. I will do that. Thank you guys for joining. There's a lot of awesome. Wait. Can you share the tools? Okay, that's cool. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'll see you guys in the breakout sessions, in the breakout rooms at 6. If anyone has any other questions, we can talk CTC if you're available. Thank you, guys. Oh, Sean, yes, you have a question. I see your hand is up. Yes.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity, and I mean the presentation is great as always. Yeah, I've been following quite a lot of your presentations, and yeah, they're always fun. Thank you. Yeah, so I asked earlier on with regards to how you dealt with clients that are coming with legacy methodology, legacy mindset, and you just expressed how you dealt with it, and that happens all the time when you work with projects. What sort of approach would you encourage them to take, so that you can work together well and produce great results? Let's put a scenario where you clearly know that the client's approach that they're taking is going to have serious repercussions down the line. And it may cause a lot of the people to resign when they seriously realize, oh, look, this project has gone from bad to worse. And they're suddenly losing great developers because they started with the wrong mindset, they started with the wrong principles. I'm currently dealing with a situation like that, where I am at Equity Bank in Nairobi. So I'm just like, I'm pretty sure you faced situations like these. How did you go about it? How did you inspire your team? How did you encourage them? How did you motivate them? What tactics and methodologies did you take in your case?
I get the vibe that you're not in design. Is that just me? Are you like in engineering?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I got that vibe from you that you're not in design. Wow. So this is an interesting question, and I think it's really difficult. It's difficult to motivate teams when you're in situations like that, because there's a lot of work that still needs